So we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب
بسم
العالمين
الله
الرحمن
الرحمن
الرحيم
الرحيم.
مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم
So
السلام ورحمة الله.
So this is part 8 of our ongoing series on of discussions on the book by Imam as-Sadiq titled Misbah al-Sharia, the Lantern of the Path. And like I say, at every one of these sessions, it's recommended that everyone read the previous parts before proceeding or watch the previous videos before proceeding, so as to avoid any confusion, misunderstanding within the subject matter. The nature of the subject matter and the style of discourse requires that each part build upon the one that came before it. So once more, I really strongly recommend that all the viewers, all the readers, well, if you're reading the actual write-up, read the previous parts and then continue with this one. But we will do a short recap. So in the first session, we continued our journey of discovery regarding the subject of prophethood. We previously discussed the philosophy of prophethood, and in the last session last week, we discussed the mission of the prophets. Now, we learnt about the powerful transformation that takes place within the hearts of the within the heart of the prophet as he's raised up to perform his monumental task. We looked at a number of verses from Quran to help us understand these ideas. In this session, we're going to be looking at the manner in which the prophet resurrects a society. And as we had learned that when a prophet is appointed by God, he undergoes a transformation that prepares his heart and soul for the monumental task that he has to accomplish. This transformation within the prophet also lays the groundwork and starts the building of the foundations that will be built further and strengthened by the prophet and future generations of believers that ultimately lead to the prophetic resurrection of a society or of society per se. And this is our topic, as we've said, for this session. So, once again, and I know I'm being a bit repetitive, but it kind of goes without saying that reading the previous session prior to this one is actually critical in order to understand the subject, but also in order to understand the nuances and niceties that this discussion brings to the table. So if everyone is comfortable, you've read the previous parts, then we can begin in the name of the one who supports the prophetic resurrection of society and is the master of the day of resurrection. We begin filled with hope that that with his permission we can gaze into his beautiful face. With his most beautiful names, we begin. Give me a salawat, please.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So first of all, in Quran, in the 28th chapter titled al-Qasas, Surah al-Qasas, the chapter of the narrations, verses 5 to 6, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "But we desire to show favor to those who are abased in the land, and to make them leaders, and to make them heirs, and to establish them in the land, and to show Pharaoh and Haman and their hosts from them that of which they were apprehensive." Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. So a subject that comes out of the verses that I've just recited, as well as the verses of Surah as-Saff, which are Surah as-Saff is the 61st chapter of the Quran, the chapter of the ranks, verses 8 to 9, uh, which read, "They want to extinguish God's light with their mouths, but God will complete his light even though the disbelievers dislike it. It is he who sent his messenger with the guidance and the true religion to make it prevail over all religions, even though the idolaters dislike it." Now, when you take both of these verses of Quran, this creates the topic, this defines the topic, which is the top topic of today, which is the prophetic resurrection of society. Now, previously, we learned that a prophet is a servant chosen by God who has been endowed with special potentialities not granted to others, so that he can discharge the duty of receiving and then giving the message of God to the people. He is entrusted with being the representative of God upon the earth. Once this servant starts to receive revelation, he is changed. He is transformed at the very core of his being. Before he became a prophet, he lived a virtuous life, but as an ordinary human being in his society, and he followed the course of his society. However, once he was chosen, once he was raised up to become a prophet, everything changed. When a person receives revelation, they are no longer the same person they were before they received revelation. Some thinkers who do not believe in the Prophet of Islam, including Orientalists and such people who do not necessarily have an agenda that is against Islam, have posited that before declaring that he was a messenger of God, the Prophet must have spent his days studying and contemplating, and this is what brought about the transformation of his character. However, this theory does not match the apparent situation of the Prophet and is entirely inaccurate and false. It was not through meditation and reflection that the Prophet was transformed and began preaching the message of Islam. On the contrary, when he was raised up as a prophet and charged with this mission, this represented a complete break with his past self. This is not only true of Prophet Muhammad, but of all of the prophets of God throughout history. If we take, for example, Moses or Musa, he was on a regular journey with his wife and child, when on a dark night in the middle of the wilderness, he had an encounter with God that changed him, and he began to receive revelation. He forgot everything else. When Moses received his divine mission, he became a different Moses to the Moses he had been mere moments before. Something had changed inside of him. His soul was in motion in a way it had never been before. Someone who claims that prophethood has nothing to do with God or the unseen world is simply repeating these claims of Orientalists who base their theories on limited research and information. In any case, the raising up of a prophet refers to a transformation, a change, an alteration, or to put it another way, a resurrection of the being of the person who has been chosen by God to serve as his messenger. When this transformation takes place, the role of the prophet begins, and that is to take this inner transformation and realize it to his external reality, to mirror the change within the prophet's spirit to the fabric of society. This is what is meant by the prophetic resurrection of society. What is revolution, Inqilab? These days, when we use this term transformation, it's taken on somewhat of a new meaning in the modern lexicon, which is that of revolution. And this is a very interesting and meaningful term. However, it should be clear that what we are talking about is a major change at the very foundational level of society. This doesn't necessarily refer to a contentious, violent, or even bloody event. It is possible that this can occur peacefully and through dialogue and through struggle and conflict, especially if there are powerful forces resisting this change. It is also possible for there to be violent events that lead to a revolution. However, since the Arabic word inqilab, which means revolution, does not contain such a definition, it can also therefore happen peacefully. If we want to give a simple analogy for the meaning of the word inqilab or revolution, consider a building where people reside. It has a particular structure and architecture. The walls, doors, and foundations all have a specific layout and placement. Now imagine if we want to change this building. Say, for example, it was a mosque or a church, and we want to convert it into apartments for people to live in. we would need to completely change the architecture. We would need to tear down some walls, put up new walls. We may need to block off certain doors and passages and open up new ones. We may even have to modify the foundations in order to support the new structure that we wish to put up. Now imagine if we want to, instead of an apartment building, we decide to build, for example, a high security bank or banquet hall, or a house for a single family, then what? We would have to make completely different changes to the architecture of the building in order that we can accommodate the function of the new building. It wouldn't be possible to simply give the building a new coat of paint and declare that it's something else entirely. This is because each of these buildings that we want to erect has its own particular and very specific layout and design, which is on the basis of its function and the purpose that it is supposed to serve. For example, if you take a masjid or a mosque, this is designed to serve as a place for Muslims to gather and worship. Or a church, this is designed to serve as a place for Christians to gather and worship. And the configuration of a mosque is different to that of a church in many aspects. A bank, for example, has an entirely different purpose. Therefore, if we wanted to make a change to a masjid, to a mosque, in order to change it to something else, to another kind of building, we would have to make some core fundamental changes. This is the meaning of Inqilab or revolution. It means changing the building, starting from the foundations, completely changing its structure, its design, the placement of any load-bearing walls, the materials it is made from, and so on and so forth, such that it becomes a completely different building to what it was before. Now, let us imagine a society, for example, one of 50 people, 50,000 people, 500,000 people, or 50 million people. It doesn't matter how many. A society is a collection of people who live together and cooperate with each other according to like a general program or plan. Everyone is walking similar paths. Of course, there are different parts of a society, but they're all generally moving towards the same general direction. You could even say they are a type of unit, so to speak, a single society. Now, this society may contain anything from, as we've said, 5 to 50 million souls and more, and could fall into one of two categories of type of society. And there are two ways in which a society can be organized. One of these is that this 50 or 5 or 50 million souls living together in a single geographic region, there is a class of people, a minority, who govern, who give orders, who hold authority over the rest of society. They are the ones who direct the activity of the society as a whole. They are the ones who legislate the laws that govern people within the society. If people act against their wishes, they punish them severely. If they criticize their rule, they will silence them using various means. If the society suffers a catastrophe of some kind, they, meaning the ruling class, the ruling minority, they will use this catastrophe to their advantage, even if it is to the detriment of other members of the society. If a tribulation befalls a society, it is the ordinary people that will be left to suffer, while the elite will use their position to protect themselves. This is one kind of foundation for a society, whether or not this society contains any class differences or not. Now, if we imagine a society in which there are class differences, this means a society in which people are not seen as equal before the law, nor do they have equal access to benefits and facilities of that society, nor is there a roughly equal standard of living. There will be one group that enjoys more privileges and benefits and better lives as a result, and who have the right to compel others, to order others to do their bidding. And another group who are compelled to serve this elite group, to obey their orders and to submit themselves to them. If such a society exists, this is what we would call a class-based society. And even the constitution of such would be class-based. This is one kind of society. Now let us imagine another kind of society for those 5, 50, 50 million, etc., whatever number. If it is not to be like the class-based society we've just mentioned, then what is it to be like? This would mean that no individual in the society has the right to make demands of another individual. Not only is there no class of individuals above all others, but there is no individual higher than any other. You would not find a single person in such a society who, if asked, why did you commit such and such act, would answer, because I wanted to. Because there is no I wanted to in this society. No one has any right to rule over anyone else, to dominate anyone else, or to deprive anyone else of their rights. Everyone is equal before the law. No one is any lower, worth any less, or less deserving of justice than anyone else. All of the 5, 50, 50 million, any other number, all of these people follow the same laws and rules and submit to a higher power. And who is this higher power? It is God. Please give me a salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So there are two basic ways in which we can design the structure of a society. In one such configuration, the majority of people are effectively slaves or prisoners of others. Whereas in the other configuration, no one needs to submit to anyone else, nor be held prisoner by anyone else, because everyone is a servant of God. With the first type of society that we examined, the class-based society, we saw that, for example, the economy would work primarily for the benefit of the ruling class. Its government would fulfill the wishes of its ruling class. Its constitution and laws would be drafted to safeguard the interests of its ruling class, or of those people allied to them. In the second type of society we mentioned, the God-based society, a society that is not driven by class divisions, in which no one has the right to boss anyone around or to dominate anyone else. The economy, as an example again, is run for the benefit of everyone. The constitution and legislature are for everyone. More importantly, whatever is good for everyone, and whatever is bad for everyone. In such a society, everyone has a share. And this is a type of paradise on earth. Now, these two configurations of society can be observed through history. We're not going to go into too much detail, as this is a somewhat complex and detailed discussion, which touches on many religious and social issues. And this isn't the correct place for such detail, at least at this time. Furthermore, it would take us many hours, days, weeks, or even months to deal with this topic in even a partially exhaustive manner. Therefore, what we will discuss going forward can be and should only be seen as a basic summary discussion, and everyone is free to do their own further research on the subject should they so desire. Perhaps in future sessions, we'll be able to go and discuss some of these highly complex and detailed nuances and subjects, God willing. So we have two configurations of society, one being class-based, in which there is wrongdoing, oppression, inequality, exploitation, division, and domination. The other being God-based, which is classless, within which there is justice, humanity, and freedom. And actually over here, special emphasis should be placed on freedom, because there are societies that profess to be classless, in which nobody is a servant or slave of anyone else, in which all are equal and all benefit equally, but which actually lack in freedom. You can see that both kinds of societal configurations have existed through the course of human history, and indeed exist in our present day. Class-based societies are those in which discrimination prevails. They are the societies founded by emperors rather, and despots. Whereas God-based societies are those in which freedom and humanity prevails, where there is no division or discrimination. These are societies that were founded by the greatest of God's prophets. Now, a question might have come to the mind of the listener. Did the prophets found societies? To which we must answer, yes, absolutely. They did found societies. And in the Quran, we have numerous examples of the kind of societies that the prophets founded. If we look at the tales of the likes of, for example, Solomon, Saul, or in Arabic known as Talut, Moses, Musa. Look at Moses and his leading of the Israelites to the Holy Land after freeing them from enslavement in Egypt. After Moses led them out of Egypt, where did he take them? He wanted to take them somewhere where they could create a just and virtuous society. And inshallah, in the next week's session, we will touch on this subject in a little bit more detail. But for now, this should be enough. In brief, there are two kinds of society. Both kinds have existed throughout history. The intellect clearly recognizes which of these is bad and sees that this has been manufactured in the ungodly political regimes of the world throughout history. The intellect also recognizes which of these are good and sees that they have been instantiated by the virtuous political orders of world history, meaning the prophets of God. The prophets were sent to their individual societies in order to transform societies from the first kind, that is class-based, to the second kind, which is God-based. This is the very essence, the core of our topic for today's session. So firstly, a question. What is a prophet? Many people think that the prophets came to a society like a wise and generous philosopher, a mountain of knowledge and wisdom, who came to society, rented a home, sat in a corner so that people would come to him and hear what he has to say. They think that a prophet is this sort of person. Now imagine that a prophet is sent to a particular society, as for example Abraham and Moses were. And this prophet takes up residence in a house, where he sets aside an hour of the day for meetings with believers and non-believers alike. Whoever comes to him, he enjoins them to good and forbids them from evil. He tells them to fear God and proves that he exists. He discusses. He makes some of them better people. Then he leaves this world behind. This is how some people imagine a prophet to be. This is not how a prophet is. When a prophet is sent to a society, this means he is chosen, and as we've previously discussed, he is transformed through a resurrection of his spirit. He is a radically different person. He is a leader of a movement who never stops. He never rests. His mind and soul are aflame. He takes one look at society and sees that the whole edifice needs tearing down and rebuilding. The whole social structure is wrong because its architecture goes against the very essence of human nature. He sees that it must change. He sees that the structure must be transformed. What does this mean? It means that he sees that this society is class-based, that it is rife with division, injustice, wrongdoing, and inhumanity. Therefore, it must be rebuilt and reordered into a society that is oriented towards God, towards Tawheed, monotheism. So what is a Tawheed-oriented society? If we examine the idea of Tawheed, the unity of God, monotheism, the uniqueness of God, as we've previously discussed, we can also say that true Tawheed by its very nature means the abolition of all social classes. True Tawheed means the power and governance of God. True Tawheed means that everything, whether the law, tradition, treaties, manners, culture, everything must be inspired by God. True Tawheed means that everyone is a servant of God alone. They do not serve anyone or anything else. Being servants of God makes them free from serving all others. When a prophet enters with this ideal, with this thought, and indeed with this goal, this class-based society will be transformed. It will be brought down and utterly ruined, and a classless, Tawheed-oriented society that is entirely free from tyranny and under the rule of the Creator will replace it. This is why prophets are sent. If we consider when Moses came to Pharaoh and told him that he should not sit upon the throne, that he should not enslave the children of Israel, and that he should not divide society into classes, had Pharaoh replied, "You're right, we do need to change things. Tell me, what do we need to do?" Then Moses would have set about changing society like a great architect, without a single drop of blood being shed. It is from those in power that violence plays a role in the prophetic transformation of society. In Quran, in Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, the third chapter of the Quran, verse number 146, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "How many a prophet fought alongside him numerous godly people? They did not waver for what afflicted them in the cause of God, nor did they weaken, nor did they give in. God loves those who endure." This is why the doctrine of holy resistance or holy struggle was promulgated. Because the ruling class, the ones against whom the revolution is directed, and those who stand to lose the most in the event of its success, are not ready to let it happen. Otherwise, had they truly understood, had they, like so many other men of wealth and power through history, suddenly experienced a change of heart and submitted to the truth and come down from their high places, then there would have been no need to fight whatsoever. Therefore, when a prophet enters a society, it is for the sake of bringing about this transformation. The prophet comes to make a change. What does this change look like? What does he do? If we look at pre-Islamic Arabia, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his pure family and righteous companions, came and asked why all the wealth of this society should be concentrated in the hands of a few, a very select few. Why should servants and slaves be subject to the whims and desires of the elite? Why should the weak be at the mercy of the wicked? Why should there not be equality between people? There is a saying, people are equal like the teeth of a comb. Now, if you look at a comb, do you see how each of its teeth are level with the next? There is not one single tooth that stands above the rest. All of them are equal. All of them are at the same level. All are one size. All are one form. They are all the same and beautiful. Humanity is like this. And this hadith, people are equal like the teeth of a comb, is from a book called Kenzul Umal, which is the treasure of the doers of good, and it's hadith number 24,822. And there's another call of our prophets. All of you are from Adam, and Adam is from dust. And this is also referenced in the books of hadith, and the references are in the write-up. That man of influence who sits in his mansion on a certain section of Mecca, who must eat and drink well, for whom the people do business, who owns slaves and workers and makes use of them, and who rules over this city, this man of influence with this description is no different to the lowest servant in his house. There is actually no difference between them. In terms of the basic substance of humanity, they are entirely alike and without any distinction between them. So why should one enjoy such wide power and influence while the other barely has enough to eat? The field should be open for everyone to participate in society. This is the call of the prophets. In all of the societies where a prophet appears, it is with this call and with this mission. A prophet comes to reform society, to change it from its existing form, which is wedded to inequality, wrongdoing, tyranny, into a new form that is balanced, beautiful, and just. This is what the prophetic resurrection of society means. Every prophet sent to a society came to achieve exactly this. There was never a single prophet who came just to sit in a corner and discuss the whims of everyday life with the people. Now, the greatest of the prophets, known as al-Azm, or those endowed with great and firm resolve, these prophets were the ones that came with new messages, whereas other prophets followed their message and continued on their path. The prophets of firm resolve are five: Noah or Nuh, Abraham or Ibrahim, Moses or Musa, Jesus or Isa, and Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and them all, and his family. Now, each of these prophets brought a new, or shall we say, updated message from the Lord of the universe. They were raised up in their societies and started powerful movements, the impacts of which can still be seen today. These prophets of firm resolve are the ones who are the axes of divine transformations in society. And all other prophets came to follow the path shown by these great messengers, or to continue or complete the works they began, or to bring their plans to fruition. Just as the successors of the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, his pure family and righteous companions, after he passed, took up his work after him, such as the role of the first Imam of the Muslims, Imam Ali, the work of Imam Hassan, the second Imam of the Muslims, the work of Imam Hussein, the third Imam of the Muslims, and indeed all of the Imams. After the Imams, it became the duty and work of the scholars of Islam. And ultimately today, it has become the work of the Master of the Age, may our souls be his ransom. And in his occultation, of course, the scholars of Islam have this responsibility. Having said that, that it's Imam Mahdi's responsibility, and the fact that he is still in occultation on account of a lack of our readiness, in his absence during his occultation, the work and duty does also fall to the righteous scholars of Islam, those who we have referenced as the righteous Islamic leadership. Please give me a salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Now, an important point about this resurrection of society is that of its necessity. Why is it necessary in the first place? You might ask, what was the problem with pre-Islamic Arab society? Why couldn't it remain in place? Could it not have been modified and turned into a fairer social order? This prophet who came had to put himself through fire and water and make personal sacrifices in order to change his society for the better. Why did he have to do this? Why couldn't they have left things as they were? What was wrong with the natural order of things? Might, after all, we are told, makes right. So let the victors enjoy their spoils. Those who are downtrodden because they were beaten. So why should the prophet work so hard to change this? This is an important question. Some might say that no one asked this question. But even if they don't ask it out loud, they might still ask it of themselves. So it's a question that must be addressed and answered. A prophet does not move without a destination in mind. He did not go through the fire and water without a valid reason. On the contrary, he looks at the social reality of his own day and age and sees that it is one wherein falsehood dominates, and one which goes against the nature of the human being and the nature of the universe. So he wants to replace falsehood with truth and redirect society toward the path of truth, to a path that is in sync with human nature and the nature of the universe. Truth and falsehood, these are two words you find mentioned throughout the Quran. The confrontation between truth and falsehood is embodied in tens of its verses. But what are truth and falsehood? Let's try and take a look and see and understand what these terms mean. So firstly, what is truth? Haqq. The human being is a creature that travels through the world with such and such of a shape and appearance. However, the human being has certain features, abilities, and needs which are unique to himself. This world in which the human being lives, where he lives out his days, also has certain features and characteristics, and it is moving towards the end for which it was created. The world that we behold with our two eyes, all of it is related. Its sun, 1 million miles away, its humans, its plants, its animals, its rocks, its mountains. Even though none of these appear to be connected at a first glance, from the perspective of someone who knows God and worships Him, there is an indivisible unity at the core of all things. The whole cosmos is one thing. All of its parts are parts of a single body. And like a single body, it is moving with all of these parts in unison. This is the nature of the world we inhabit. In the human being, we can see that the stomach performs a function, the eye performs a function, the liver performs one function, the brain and nerves perform a function. But when you put it all together, you find that they have one thing in common. They all contribute to the life of this human being, to his movements, to his efforts, to his continued existence in this world. The sum of all the motions you witness in the cosmos, whether on a grand or microscopic scale, when put together, it is clear to see that the entire universe is moving as a single unit, that is moving as one. All of the other denizens of this cosmos, inhabitants of this cosmos, who exist alongside the human being, which either lack awareness or free will and have no say in their direction of travel, they go with the flow of the universe. It is only the human being that has free will. It is only the human being that can choose to do his own thing, to separate himself from the cosmic sequence of events, to turn around, to walk the other way. It is only the human being that can choose not to follow the cosmic procession. Everything else that exists, if it can be taken out of its natural state or diverted from its natural heading, it is only by virtue of human interference with it. It is the human being that discovers uranium, and instead of using it to treat thousands of illnesses, turns it into a bomb with the capacity to kill millions. Uranium does not make itself into a bomb. It merely follows its natural course. It is not, for example, the marijuana that instead of being used as a medicine to cure a sickness, is instead made into a drug to intoxicate youngsters. It is not the fault of the marijuana how it is being used. It is not the fault of the matter. Rather, it is the fault of the human being that choose to use it in this way. In this procession of which the sun is one member, the earth is another member, the cosmos and all of its countless inhabitants, denizens, are members. All of these are following their natural path. There is only one kind of being, this devil, this agent, this free-willed entity, that sometimes diverts these things from their proper path. Uranium follows its natural trajectory. Marijuana follows its natural trajectory. Morphine follows its natural trajectory. Morphine, for example, which should be used entirely for the purpose of helping humanity, can instead be used to make humanity miserable. A foodstuff which should give life to mankind is instead used to bring death to mankind. It is not by its own choice that it is doing this. It is the human being that diverts it from its proper course. It is only the human being that has this ability. Because the human being has this ability, and because the human being has free will, the human being has the power to change. And because he has the power to change, there must be a law to guide him and direct him to the right path, to tell him how to join the cosmic procession towards God. Also, a law to warn him that if he leaves this path, he will have left the cosmic procession. What does this mean? It means that the human being needs some sort of system of law to bring him into harmony with the rest of creation. What do we call this law? What is its name? Its name is truth or Haqq. This is what truth means. It is the law which is in harmony with the very nature of the cosmos itself. And because it is in harmony with the cosmos, it is also in harmony with human nature. The human being, after all, is a part of the cosmos which he inhabits. Because the human being is one part of this greater whole, and because this law that is promulgated in order to guide him is in harmony with both his nature and the nature of the cosmos as a whole, it leads him to a good life. So what then is falsehood or batil? Falsehood is that course, law, and or path, the following of which goes against the nature of the cosmos and against the nature of humanity. It is that which is created by tyrants, devils, and those who wish to lead others astray. The prophets always brought truth in order to extinguish falsehood. In the society in which prophets presided over people, and in a society where pharaohs presided over people, people were divided into different social classes, and society was structured in a way that one class ruled over the others and terrorized them for the benefit of itself. Such a system and such a structure of society is one that is founded on falsehood, on batil. So what is the prophetic function? Please give me a salawat and we continue.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Now the prophets came to tear down this edifice of falsehood. They came to reduce it to dust and to replace and establish truth in its place. Therefore the prophet put himself through fire and water for the sake of truth. The truth is what he spoke. The truth is what he desired. It was for the sake of establishing the truth in place of falsehood that the prophets struggled tirelessly, unceasingly, never weakening or floundering in their cause, never forgetting it for even a fleeting moment, never resting, never diverting. It was a matter of establishing the truth in place of falsehood. This is the proper analysis of the prophetic function. Now, to sum up what we've learned so far, the prophets came to overthrow a regime that was class-based, tyrannical, exploitative, and inhuman. All of these qualities are best summed up by a single term: ignorance, or in Arabic we say jahiliyyah. Therefore, the prophets came to overthrow the regime of ignorance and to establish a divine system in its place in the form of a Tawheed-oriented society. They wanted to create a society that was under the authority and governance of God, rather than one that was subject to the whims and desires of men. This is what the prophets were supposed to achieve. The prophets came to replace an incorrect social order with one that was good and right. Their slogan of divine unity was also for this purpose. Their struggle against tyranny and false gods was also for this purpose. It was for this reason that the tyrants sought to suppress them. Now, if we do a short tafsiri discussion on Moses and Pharaoh in the Quran, the verses from the Quran that we're going to be discussing are the first 6 verses from Surah al-Qasas, the chapter of the narrations, which is the 28th chapter of the Quran. And they describe this situation that we've been discussing perfectly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, these are the verses of the clear book. We relate to you some of the account of Moses and Pharaoh in truth for a people who have faith. Indeed, Pharaoh tyrannized over the land, reducing its people to factions, abasing one group of them, slaughtering their sons and sparing their women. Indeed, he was one of the agents of corruption. But we desired to show favor to those who were abased in the land, and to make them leaders and to make them heirs, and to establish them in the land, and to show Pharaoh, Haman, and their hosts from them that of which they were apprehensive. Pharaoh's regime of ignorance and the pharaonic society that he presided over, and the social order that Moses wanted to establish in its place, this is what is described in these verses. The two opposing sides could not be more clearly defined, and therefore God gives a promise to those who follow Moses' example. He promises that ultimately it is God's will that the followers of Moses in the world, meaning the supporters of divine unity, of Tawheed, should be successful in their endeavors. The reason for this is clear, and this is another topic that we will discuss in more detail in future sessions. And that is, what is the ultimate or final goal of prophethood? To what end will the prophets be victorious, and why? They will be victorious because their struggle aligns with the nature of humanity and the cosmos as a whole. And this is summed up in this verse. These are the verses of the clear book. We relate to you some of the account of Moses and Pharaoh in truth for a people who have faith. Now, this is interesting. Notice that the Quran says that it will relate some of the account of Moses and Pharaoh. This is because the Quran's approach to relating such accounts from the lives of the prophets is to focus on a very specific aspect of the story in order to make a specific point or teach a specific lesson, rather than serving as a storybook that relates the entire story in great, great detail, where sometimes the message can get lost. This is an important distinction of the Quran. It doesn't waste time on irrelevant detail that is unnecessary to elucidate a specific point. Rather, it focuses on the point itself, and the historical narrative it provides merely serves to provide some context. In this segment, the Quran mentions a brief excerpt from the story of Moses in order to deliver a very specific message, namely the triumph of truth over falsehood. However, today we're not going to be covering all of the parts of this story. We'll cover those portions that help us to understand our subject. God says he wants to recount a relevant part of the account of Moses and Pharaoh in truth, bil-Haqq, meaning in accordance with the truth, as it really happened, not as a myth or some sort of legend, for a people who have faith, to benefit those people who truly believe. In other words, God is saying, what we are about to relate to you is not something idle or useless. On the contrary, it is extremely effective and useful for the faithful who are around you. When they hear this story from this perspective, they will grasp God's way of doing things in this regard. And as a result, they will see what it is they need to do. So the next section is abasing a group from amongst them. Indeed, Pharaoh tyrannized over the land, reducing its people to factions, abasing one group of them, slaughtering their sons and sparing their women. Indeed, he was one of the agents of corruption. Indeed, Pharaoh tyrannized over the land. Pharaoh raised himself up in the land and established his dominion over it, reducing its people to factions. In this new order, he was at the top of the hierarchy, but he divided those beneath him into different groups and levels. Some were closer to him, such as, for example, Haman, who was one of his generals or close allies, and others similar to him. Then there was the level beneath them, and a level beneath them, and so on and so on and so forth, until the lowest level, abasing one group of them. So, as well as dividing society into different groups, there was one group in particular that he abased. Now, the Arabic word yastad'ifu, which is derived from istid'af, means to deem weak, to oppress by deeming weak. This means that he made a group a particular target of his oppression and cruelty. However, the word istid'af, from which yastad'if is derived, means a lot more than just oppression, although that's certainly a component of it. And peoples who are abased, they are also oppressed. However, to be abased also means to be made weak, to be weakened, to be denied opportunities, to be deprived of power. So he not only oppressed them, he rendered them unable to resist the oppression, abasing one group of them. He made one group, one class of people in particular, weaker than all the rest and rendered them entirely impotent. They were denied every opportunity and every benefit accorded to other members of the society. If you study the way society functions globally and more specifically in the so-called developing world and collective West, especially in the 20th and 21st centuries, you will easily understand this. In such societies, all the means of advancement and development are monopolized by a small group of people, and no one outside that group is permitted such opportunities. It is as if they cannot breathe without the permission of those who rule over them. Their growth, if they grow at all, is entirely for the benefit of their rulers. They are utterly exploited, abasing one group of them. So how were they abased? Slaughtering their sons. They did not allow their youth to become numerous because they feared a rebellion amongst the slaves. And they knew if such a rebellion were to occur, it would be led by the youth. Furthermore, in those days, women were not as involved in social issues as they are today. And generally, the sons took on the most important responsibilities. So they focused on oppressing the sons of this abased class. There are some reports and traditions which say among the youth there were still young men like Moses appearing. And it was, of course, one of these, Moses himself, that came and changed the world. A priest foretold that a child would be born into this world, fitting this description, whose name is Moses, and he would put an end to the Pharaonic rule. Whether or not Pharaoh accepted or believed this policy is neither here nor there. Rather, Pharaoh was a shrewd operator, and he understood that it was the young men of the Israelites who posed the greatest threat to his rule. He feared the appearance of a young man such as Moses, who would be driven by his great altruism to oppose his tyrannical rule. Therefore, in order to forestall the appearance of such a young man, Moses ordered for the sons of the Israelites to be put to the slaughter, and sparing their women. Pharaoh did not kill the women of the Israelites, either to promote immorality and vice, and so that they would be forced to marry outside of the Israelites. In other words, the daughters of the Israelites could not marry the sons of the Israelites, as they had been slaughtered, and so would be forced to marry Egyptians and thereby have Egyptian children. This would integrate the Israelites with Pharaoh's society by destroying their communal identity. By some accounts, the Israelites were enslaved and had been oppressed by the Egyptians for hundreds of years. And yet, in spite of this, they were able to hold fast to their ideals and their faith. So the battle lines were drawn between the two sides. On one side, there is Pharaoh, whom some of the verses of Quran describe by saying, indeed, he was one of the agents of corruption. In other words, he was a corrupter of human nature, a corrupter of society, and a corrupter of the world. In Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow in the Quran, we read in verse number 205, and if he were to wield authority, he would cause corruption in the land and to ruin the crop and the stock, and God does not like corruption. What sets apart Pharaoh and his ilk is that he sowed corruption in the land and brought about its ruin. He did everything he could to stand in the way of growth and human flourishing. So whatever development did take place was distorted and diverted from its proper course. So the next verse says, but we desire to show favor to those who are abased in the land. This is, of course, Allah talking, and to make them leaders and to make them heirs. Now, on the other hand, what about truth? What about God's will? What is it that God does in such circumstances? But we desire. This was God's will. Now, as we'd mentioned in an earlier session on Tawheed, on monotheism, the uniqueness and unity of God, this was his existential will, al-iradat al-takwiniyya, to show favor to those who were abased in the land. Notice, and this is actually a very important point, that God doesn't say we desired, aradna. Yani he doesn't use the past tense. He doesn't say that he desired that only at this time, only at the time of the Israelites' enslavement. No. The tense used is the present tense. And this indicates that this is something continuous, something unceasing throughout human history. This is actually a very important point. And many translations of the Quran, unfortunately, translate the word nurid in the past tense, whereas the word is explicitly in the present tense conjugation. Anyone with even basic understanding of the Arabic language grammar should know this. In other words, God always desires to show favor to those who are abased, to the underclass, to the downtrodden, to the oppressed, and to save them and bring them out of their abasement, and to make them leaders, to take them out from being followers in their society, and to make them into leaders and rulers, and to make them heirs, so that they will inherit all the good things in this world. This is God's will. The next verse says, and to establish them in the land, and to show Pharaoh, Haman, and their hosts from them that of which they were apprehensive. And to establish them in the land and to show Pharaoh and Haman, because these are the representatives of the ruling class. Of course, Pharaoh was from the ruling class. He was the highest member of this class. You could argue that he was a class all of his own. And even other members of the ruling class, such as Haman, were under his control. Haman was the representative of the class directly beneath Pharaoh, who placed their powers and abilities at the disposal of Pharaoh. And their hosts, that is, their soldiers, those who fight for their cause and serve them without necessarily enjoying all the benefits they do, from them, from the abased and downtrodden, that of which they were apprehensive. Meaning what Pharaoh and Haman feared would happen, namely that the downtrodden would rise up and seize power from them. After all, in any society, the downtrodden and dispossessed usually make up the majority. This too is a manifestation of God's will. Please give me a salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So to conclude, this is how, when a prophet emerges, he stands up to an ignorant system, a system of ignorance. He shows people a divine and Tawheed-oriented system, and then strives to establish this new social order, replacing the existing one, replacing the order of falsehood with the order of divine truth. So with this third session on prophethood, we now have a basic understanding of the philosophy of prophethood, the mission of the prophets, and now the prophetic resurrection of society. These are extremely important subjects. And the next one that we will cover in, inshallah, the next session is the goals of prophethood. Now, some might think that this is a somewhat long-winded manner in which to discuss prophethood. And it is exactly because some people think in this manner and fail to grasp the importance of this manifestation of the justice of God that we have to delve into such detail. For too long, Islam and religion generally has been considered something backward and for a bygone era. Many in the 20th and 21st centuries consider science to be the new God or the new theology. Furthermore, there is an abasing of the societies of the entire world by the pharaonic powers of today that tells any free-thinking person that there must be an alternative, and there is. The alternative to the insanity, the abasement of people across the world, the genocides, the massacres, the usurpation of the people's rights, the promotion of murder, the redefinition of words to convey a different, perhaps less horrific meaning, and more. That alternative is for people to start thinking, to start reflecting on the idea of a God-centric or a Tawheed-oriented society, and looking at their own societies, their communities, even their families, and examine whether they represent a class-based grouping or whether they are a God-based or Tawheed-oriented grouping. As we've learned, a class-based grouping of whatever size will ultimately crumble under the weight of its own injustices, whereas the grouping that is God-based, that is Tawheed-oriented, this will always flourish because this type of grouping is entirely in sync with the innate nature of humanity. Furthermore, in any scenario when God is placed front and center, this grouping, be it a family, a country, a world, will flourish because God will ensure that all the people are equal as the teeth of a comb, and that only the name of God remains the highest. وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please give me a salawat so we can have the nasheed.
Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab. Nothing in my hands, loneliness and sorrow, falling where I stand, guilty to my marrow. How I feel the flames lapping at my body, running towards desire, chasing after folly. Abaya of woe, Abaya of forgiveness, Abaya of robe, for souls that bear the blisters, shroud for the alone, shroud for the alone. Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab. Tortured is my soul, how my heart is broken. Bitter are my tears, fearful is my falling. Offered such a choice, 'neath the shroud of darkness. In my head his voice, tell me where your heart is. Abaya of pain, Abaya of sorrows, woven from the chains, woven by the horrors. Abaya of love, Abaya of love. Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab. Should I choose to leave, what fate would befall me? Eternally to grieve and abandon he who calls me. Oh, even if I ran, still I'd see the burning. For the hardest of the hearts, forever they are yearning. Every hour I hear the screams, every breath breathes the oppression. While I'm awake or in my dreams, love for Hussein is my confession. Abaya of tears, Abaya of Jannah, shroud of all our fears, shroud of no surrender. Lovers of Hussein, lovers of Hussein. Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab. How I wish I knew why my mother bore me. For wretchedness and fear is all that stands before me. Oh, if only she had not nurtured and adored me. For surely I must know the place I have before thee. Abaya of hope, comfort for the broken, 'neath that blessed cloak, tender words are spoken. Kiss the precious hand, kiss the precious hand. Holy are the wounds, knitted their perfection. Precious are the souls, whisper their affection. Souls from before time, hear her tortured calling, safe within a shroud. Infant tears are falling. Abaya of rebirth, abaya of yearning, such amazing worth, shroud for the returning, abaya of truth, abaya of truth. Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab. The Abaya of Zaynab adorns the sacred martyrs, raises them aloft to where Hussein's heart is, adorns our blessed Imam in lonely isolation, the Imam who feels the pain of every generation. Oh, our Imam who guides the hand, sacrifice for freedom, the one whose blessed voice brings hope to the forsaken. Abaya of choice, abaya of resistance, abaya of the voice that cries out with persistence, never to be bowed, never to be bowed. Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab. Burning is my tent in this veil of error. All my clothes are rent, gone are all my fetters. Zaynab's tears, they quench the flames of my rebellion. from my heart is rent. Satan's vile dominion, Abaya of the pure, Abaya of Zaynab, robe of all the sure, mercy of Muhammad, Abaya of Zahra, Abaya of Hussainis, comfort for the lost, comfort for the lost. Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Holy Zaynab, Ya Zaynab, Ya Zaynab.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا بنت سلطان الأنبياء، السلام عليك يا بنت صاحب الحوض واللواء، السلام عليك يا بنت من عرج به إلى السماء ووصل إلى مقام قاب قوسين أو أدنى، السلام عليك يا بنت نبي الهدى وسيد الورى ومنقذ العباد من الردى، السلام عليك يا بنت صاحب الخلق العظيم والآيات والذكر الحكيم، السلام عليك يا بنت صاحب المقام المحمود والحوض المورود واللواء المشهود، السلام عليك يا بنت منهج دين الإسلام وصاحب القبلة والقرآن وعلم الصدق والحق والإحسان، السلام عليك يا بنت صفوة الأنبياء وعلم الأتقياء ومشهور الذكر في الأرض والسماء ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا بنت خير خلق الله وسيد خلقه وأول العدد قبل إيجاد أرضه وسماواته وآخر الأبد بعد فناء الدنيا وأهلها ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا بنت إمام الأتقياء، السلام عليك يا بنت عماد الأصفياء، السلام عليك يا بنت يعسوب الدين السلام عليك يا بنت أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا بنت قائد البررة. السلام عليك يا بنت طامع الكفرة والفجرة. السلام عليك يا بنت وارث النبيين. السلام عليك يا بنت خليفة سيد المرسلين. السلام عليك يا بنت النبأ العظيم على اليقين. السلام عليك يا بنت من حساب الناس عليه والكوثر في يديه والنص يوم الغدير عليه ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا بنت من قاد زمام ناقتها جبرائيل وشاركها في مصابها إسرافيل وغضب بسببها الرب الجليل وبكى لمصابها إبراهيم الخليل ونوح وموسى الكليم في كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا بنت البدور السواطع. السلام عليك يا بنت زمزم والصفا. السلام عليك يا بنت مكة ومنى. السلام عليك يا بنت من حمل على البراق في الهوى. السلام عليك يا بنت من حمل الزكاة بأطراف الرداء وبذله على الفقراء. السلام عليك يا بنت من أسرى به الله من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى. السلام عليك يا بنت محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا بنت علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا بنت فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا بنت خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك وعلى جدك المختار. السلام عليك وعلى أبيك حيدر الكرار. السلام عليك وعلى السادات الأطهار الأخيار وهم حجج الله على الأقطار سادات الأرض والسماء من ولد أخيك الحسين الشهيد العطشان الظمآن وهو أبو 9 الأطهار وهم حجج الله من طرق الشرق والغرب من الليل والنهار الذين حبهم فرض على أعناق كل الخلائق. السلام عليك يا بنت ولي الله الأعظم. السلام عليك يا أخت ولي الله المعظم. السلام عليك يا عمة ولي الله المكرم. السلام عليك يا أم المصائب زينب ورحمة الله وبركاته.